Welcome to another installment of The Real Exchange. Today our special guest is Dr. Deborrah Hyde. She is a board-certified neurosurgeon and one of the first African American females to do so. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into this interview. Dr. Hyde, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So our first question for you is, how does your story begin? Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Laurel, Mississippi, January 18th, 1949. I just had a birthday. I'm 71 now.
Well, congratulations. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
What are some of your favorite hobbies?
Well, in the past, I used to make all my clothes, and I made jewelry. I actually had some shows both in Los Angeles and in Mississippi, jewelry shows. But I don't really have time to do that. Neurosurgery really has occupied my whole life up until December of last year, December 18th, 2018, when I retired.
Okay. So I see from our surroundings in your home, you're a art collector. What are some of your favorite pieces, or where have you gotten some of your favorite pieces from?
Well, whenever I travel, I try and buy either art or furniture, something that I can ship back. I've been blessed to be able to see quite a few distant corners of the world, and especially Africa and Southeast Asia have been my favorite places. Istanbul, Turkey. So I've been blessed to see quite a few places.
Awesome. Okay. What started you on your journey to becoming a neurosurgeon?
Well, I really had no idea that I would even go into medicine. I went to high school and undergraduate school here in Mississippi, at Oak Park High School, and Tougaloo College is where I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. I was in graduate school in Cleveland, Ohio. My thesis, master's thesis, was about developmental biology in the mouse brain and the mouse eye. And I thought I'd probably be a college professor. All of my role models were primarily teachers. I had never been exposed to any physicians, any African American physicians, and so medicine had never really entered my mind as a possible career choice. But when I finished my master's degree, I was the only woman, and actually the only black person in that program, and all of the white men were going to medical school. And I decided I had better grades, why can't I be a doctor? So that's really how I ended up in medicine. Okay. And because my interest was the nervous system, it seemed logical that, initially I thought logical that I would become a neurologist. But after being exposed to surgery, when we do clerkships as a second-year student in medical school, I was just taken by neurosurgery, and surgery in particular. And so that's how it came about. Okay. But I tell you, I really believe that it was God's plan for me. Okay. I really believe that. Okay. I just didn't know it.
You just didn't know it. He led you in that path, and you were like, you know what, it's lining up, so I'll go this way.
Absolutely. I think my steps were ordered. I do.
Yes. Okay. What were some of your barriers to entry?
Well, let's take about just medical school. I was blessed to be able to go to Case Western Reserve because it's one of the prestigious schools in the country. But during the interviews, we had to interview different professors in different areas of specialty. And the chairman of the graduate department of biology interviewed me, and I'm a very mature man. And he thought that he was being helpful to me when he said that perhaps I should consider, really what he meant was to consider a black school, medical school, because of the caliber of student at Case Western, and I might have difficulty competing because I had gone to college in Mississippi, and even though I had a master's degree from Cleveland State, it was a state school, it wasn't Case Western Reserve. So clearly he was concerned about my well-being, and thought it was in my favor that he was making those suggestions. I begged to differ at that time, and because I had been accepted there, chose to go to Case. I had no questions about my ability to compete.
Yes.
He had doubts.
He had doubts, right.
But I showed him at the end of medical school because I graduated in the top 25% of my class. I was elected to Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honorary Society, which elects the top 25% of each class all over the country. So that said a lot about his caliber of student at Case Western Missouri.
Yes.
Because I did better than most of them.
Wow, wow. And especially being an African American female in a male-dominated area. So that says a lot.
True.
That says a lot. How did being a neurosurgeon impact your personal life?
It's tough. Training is tough. Time, the hours, my shifts were often 36 hours on, and then home just long enough to shower, maybe take a nap. I mean, it was really grueling, but that's how you learn. Mm-hmm. And I did it just like the guys. I mean, you do what you have to do. Okay. I've always been very disciplined, and I don't mind hard work. And in fact, I'm always reminded by this quote from President Calvin Coolidge about persistence, that persistence and determination are so important, more important than talent and all that, because there are a lot of people who are unsuccessful but have a lot of talent, and genius is overrated because there are a lot of people who are very smart who don't really excel very much. Mm-hmm. That it's so important to have be persistent and to be determined and focused, and that those things are omnipotent. I like to paraphrase it and say that persistence, determination, and faith in God are what's omnipotent. Okay. And I think that carries one a long way.
Wonderful, wonderful. Did you face any challenges? We touched on this, but did you face any challenges being an African American female?
Oh, that's right. Well, it not as much as many women have in general, because I've heard some really horror stories about other female neurosurgeons, white and black. I think an advantage to me in my training and where I went to medical school was that because I had a strong background in the nervous system and I studied a lot, I really often excelled on the test, and my fund of knowledge was rather extensive. So I could answer questions as a medical student that the residents could answer at the conferences, and that's really what I think caught the professor's attention, because he first told me that when I approached him about becoming a neurosurgeon, he said that it was too difficult for women, that I should go be a neurologist. And but I went to their conferences, and the more I answered questions, the more he realized I existed on the planet.
Yeah.
And, I think that's why he let me in. I often wondered, did he let me in because he thought I could make it, or did he let me in so that he could prove I couldn't, and he wouldn't have to worry about any other women bothering him? But I was blessed by the training program that I was in. I did not face any from my professors. There was a little stuff from students every now and then, But I was trained by gentlemen. I never felt threatened, never harassed. There are women who had lawsuits against professors for sexual advances and all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I was never disrespected. It was hard work, but it's supposed to be hard work. Mm-hmm. And I was just blessed to be where I was at the time.
To me, that's even further confirmation that this was God's plan for you, that you were in an environment surrounded by gentlemen and not persecuted for your decision to go down that path to be a neurosurgeon.
Absolutely.
So that's really good.
And I think it's important. Faith has always been a major part of my life, the center of my life. And then as neurosurgery came along, it was my faith and neurosurgery, and it was really always with that reverence to God that I did my job. I never went into surgery without prayer. On difficult cases, planned cases, I'd call home and have my mother and my sister pray for the patient and for me. It was nothing in the ICU that's where neurosurgeons spend most of the time. You're not in the operating room, you're in the intensive care unit. Mm-hmm. And the nurses were ever talking about how, we'll see Dr. Hyde standing there with the chaplain praying. We've never seen anybody else doing that. I mean, it's just, I believe. And I think that has had a lot to do with the success of my career.
Do you find it an honor to be among the first African American women to become a board-certified neurosurgeon?
Absolutely. I'm rather proud of myself. And you know, it was anything that I've ever. I was always a high achiever, you know, in school. Well, it was important to me, but I was always trying to please and make my family happy, and trying to make them proud of me, and because they sacrificed a lot for me.
They invested in you.
And I was just so blessed to have been born into the family in which I was raised. My grandmother was an amazing woman who raised us because my mother and my stepfather were working. And I was just so highly favored. So I've just really tried to live a life deserving of those blessings. I've just, it's just been an amazing journey. It has been.
Wonderful, wonderful. Have you ever had a surgical case that really tested your skills?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, many. But I can tell you about the longest case that I ever did. I was chief resident. His name, I'll never forget, Charles Thurman. He had been a paratrooper. I met him at the VA hospital. And he came in and having seizures. He was having grand mal seizures. And no one had ever ordered any CAT scans, any MRI scans or anything on him. So I ordered those studies. And he had this huge brain tumor, what's called a meningioma. It originated at the base of his skull, but had been growing so long, it was bigger than a grapefruit. Oh, and a tumor that is benign can be very slow growing, so it can displace brain, a lot of brain, and it not even be really that obvious. They started noticing bizarre behavior because it affected a lot of his frontal lobe. And no one ever did any studies. But he was having more and more difficulty. And he had a mother with whom he lived. And after getting those studies, and he had this huge tumor, and it was going to cause his death at some point. And over time, I developed a relationship with he and his mom, and we decided we were going to go after this tumor. And this was he was a VA patient, but because it was such a difficult case, brought it over to the university to do it. So there I am with my professor, because I was a chief resident, but there's always an attending, especially on a very difficult case like that. The case took 26 hours. 26 hours. I took a break at the 18th hour. The tumor was so bloody, you take a little piece and you spend time trying to dry up the bleeding. And it was just that tedious. But I took a break, and while I was gone, my professor decided he was going to take a little bit. He thought he'd been a little impatient, so he caused more bleeding than there should have been. And then I'll never forget Dr. Brockett, because that was always my thing with him. We became good friends after finished training, but I remind him of that case because the bleeding that we got at that point was so difficult. It was really hard to stop. I mean, I just spent hours and hours after coming back from that short break trying to stop this bleeding. And my professor saying, you know, you have to face, you're going to lose him. You have to just face him. I won't stop. He's going to have to die on this table. I will not stop.
Yes.
And finally, like I said, it took 26 hours. I had accepted that he probably was not going to be well. I didn't expect him to be well, but I wasn't going to walk away. And all that time, I'm crying, I'm operating, but tears are flowing, and I'm thinking about his mother. How am I going to tell her? But I managed to get the bleeding to stop, still expecting him not to wake up. Well, because, you know, we tried to keep him a little sedated, but because we were having all this trouble, we were just trying to do it. Anyway, he lived. He survived. Now, he had some problems even before, and it was a stormy course, but he got out of the hospital. He was able to go home eventually. And so that was the story with Dr. Bright and I always shared that because had I listened to him, I would have walked away and let him die.
Right.
But I was not going to walk away. He would have had to just die on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And just thank God, we were just blessed that he survived. It was stormy, but he made it.
So what are you most passionate about in life?
Well, my life has been consumed by neurosurgery and God being the center of all that I am. And passion is really, to me, it ought to be what is it that drives you? What is it that's most important to you? And I have to say that's been my career and my family and my relationship with God.
Okay. I have another question for you. What would you say to young people today who have aspirations to excel but feel like the resources are not there?
Well, one, I would say excel in spite thereof. Because, if you have enough faith, things will work out somehow. Mm-hmm. I just believe there are ways to make it work. I mean, I had a lot of loans, but if you do well enough, you can get some scholarships as well. But I just think that education is the key. I just think that's the key to success. Mm-hmm. On whatever, I know that we don't all want to be doctors and, lawyers. I mean, God gives all of us talents. And but to find one's divine purpose, whatever that is, if it's to be a secretary, to be the best secretary you can be, but have God order your steps in every aspect of life. Again, persistence and determination, being focused, defining that divine purpose. And oftentimes it takes a good relationship with God, I think, to lead you to that. Mm-hmm. So don't give up. Sometimes it may seem like, how on earth can I do this? How did this little nappy-headed girl from Lower Mississippi become a brain surgeon? I mean, my goodness, if I can do that, anybody can do anything they want. I just believe that. And I tell you, it's also important to always remember that in that whole process, God, to whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. And that's of all of us, whether we are students, whether we're neighbors, whatever. Because when we do all of those things, it helps build character, it helps build things that make it easier for you to succeed. It makes it easier for God to bless you. And then your cup just runs over. Mm-hmm. And I just don't ever give up. Define that purpose. And sometimes you just get an education. You may not know. I had no idea what I would end up doing. I thought I'd probably be a teacher. But to stay open and focused.
And our last question for you, what are your future goals?
Well, I couldn't sit at home. I'm retired and now here in Laurel, and I'm not the kind to sit around, so I have an amazing job at Ellisville State School. Okay. I care for patients who, for the most part, are intellectually compromised, with intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities, which I enjoy because a lot of that's neurological.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hyde, for being with us today. I've really enjoyed our interaction, and that's a wrap.